Okay, good evening, everybody. Tonight's the last class on Pesach. So we're going to discuss things that you need to know before Pesach and by the Seder and various different times of Pesach. So first of all, I want to remind everybody, don't forget to sell your chametz. And again, you don't wait for the last minute to sell your chametz because you're not selling your chametz to the rabbi. You're just appointing the rabbi, your agent, to sell chametz for you on Erev Pesach to the guy. And if you come to the rabbi after he sold the chametz, you have a big problem because halachically it would be too late for you to sell the chametz. So people have to make sure next week or whatever, not to wait for the last minute and make sure they're selling the chametz to the rabbi or appointing the rabbi as their agent to sell the chametz. That's number one. Secondly, if somebody is going to a later time zone, let's say they're going from California to New York, or they're going to Eretz Yisrael, they need to speak to Eruv because you cannot necessarily sell the chametz here. If somebody's going to New York, they cannot sell the chametz to a rabbi here unless if the rabbi makes an earlier sale. Because when the rabbi sells the chametz here, it's 3 hours later in New York, so over there it's already too late to sell the chametz. So if you're going out east, you need to speak to a Rav where you should be selling your chametz, and because it's a very important thing, you might not be able to sell it here, because when the Rav sells the chametz, it's too late for your chametz to be sold. Same thing, now normally this year, Bedikat chametz, the night before Erev Pesach. Erev Pesach is Wednesday this year, because Thursday, Friday, 3 days Yom Tov basically. So Bedikat chametz is Tuesday night. Tuesday night, as soon as nightfall comes, you have to check the house with the candle. Make sure you're not putting the candle into any dangerous place, or you also use a flashlight, which is good. Now, Bedikat chametz needs to be done in any place that you bring chametz into during the year, which means you have to do Bedikat chametz in your car. You have to do Bedikat chametz, search for the chametz in your office. Now, those things, or even part of your house, you can do Bedikat chametz earlier. You don't have to do it the last night, which is Tuesday night. The only time, though, you're able to make a bracha on Bedikat chametz is when you do it Tuesday night. But let's say somebody wants to make the kitchen Pesach already the Sunday before Pesach. Okay? Now, you can't be cooking Pesach and still not have been done Bedikat chametz because you have to make sure there's no chametz there. So if somebody, let's say for argument's sake, plans to make the kitchen Pesach on Sunday, so then Saturday night, they take a candle, no 10 pieces of bread. They take a candle, a flashlight, and they do Bedikat chametz without a bracha in that room that you're going to be already making Pesach. If you're making Pesach 2 weeks before, so you do 2 weeks before the night before you're going to be making Pesach. If people are traveling, I don't want to not waste, God forbid, I don't want to spend time on this now. So if you're traveling out of town, then you have to ask a shayla where you should do Bedikat chametz, and depending when you're going, when you're coming, and the various different dinim. But people need to do Bedikat chametz in their businesses if they're planning to come into the business during Chol Hamoed. Your house, your cars. Okay. Now, if somebody's leaving town, they need to ask a shayla because you have an obligation to do Bedikat chametz. But again, I don't want to. Maybe at the end, if we have extra time, I'll be able to do it. But I don't want to spend time on that. There's a lot of important things that we need to cover. Another important thing that people should keep in mind is that you have your vacuum cleaners or your vacuum cleaner bags. Okay, if you have a vacuum cleaner that's bagless, it's a vacuum cleaner itself. If not, you have a bag. That bag is full of chametz because you vacuum chametz during the year. So the last time you're doing your chametz vacuum, so to speak, you have to remember afterwards to throw out the bag or clean out the machine. Because if you're not planning to use the vacuum cleaner at all during Pesach, you could sell it with your chametz. But if you're planning to use the vacuum cleaner during Chol Hamoed for all the matzah crumbs, so then it has to be cleaned before Pesach to make sure that there is no chametz left in the vacuum cleaner, and then you could use it for Pesach. So that's another thing you have to remember. Many women are machmir that if they cook and bake a whole year wearing rings, so when it comes to food preparation on Pesach, they won't wear the rings because you don't know, the ring is metal. Let's say you have a gold wedding band, it's metal, and maybe hot chametz squirted on it, and therefore it became technically chametz, like a vessel, and then you're going to be preparing Pesach food. So many people have a strictness that if they wore their rings in the kitchen when they cooked and baked, so then on Pesach they won't actually wear, they could wear the rings, but they don't wear it when they're doing food preparation. Another thing is Erev Pesach. This year there's you also have this year Erev Pesach is what's called Tainis B'Chayrim, the fast of the firstborn. So Wednesday morning is the fast of the firstborn, and if you're a firstborn, the custom is you listen to a siyum, the ending of a tractate. But you have to keep in mind that once you hear the siyum, you can break your fast. But until you daven and hear the siyum, the ending of a tractate, you're not allowed to eat. So the firstborn is getting up in the morning, wants to take a coffee before davening, unless if he makes a siyum first, he's not allowed to drink a cup of coffee until after davening. When he hears the siyum, then he can break his fast. Now, I just want to take a minute to go through Bedikat chametz, what to do, and people should be very careful and aware of this. The custom is, according to Kabbalah, especially, but it's brought down in Shulchan Aruch, that before we do Bedikat chametz, we put out 10 pieces of bread. Halachically, the Rebbe writes you don't have to, but minig Yisrael Torah, he says the minig is to put out 10 pieces of bread. Kabbalistically, it has to do with the 10 attributes of the soul. And Bedikat chametz is not only looking for physical chametz, it's for looking for spiritual chametz. So the custom is we put out 10 pieces of bread. Now you have to be careful of a few things with the 10 pieces of bread. Number one, all together, all 10 pieces of bread together should be at least 1 ounce, a kazayas, because then you have a mitzvah of burning the chametz. But no one piece of chametz should be bigger than a kazayas, bigger than an ounce. And it's very important. This is an halacha, this is practical. Because the din is, on a kazayas chametz, you have a mitzvah to get rid of it. You have to burn it. So if you're going to, let's say, put out 10 pieces of bread, and each piece is big, and then you only find 9, halachically, you have to search and search and search and search until you find the 10th piece of bread. If it's a small piece of bread, altogether, all 10 equal a kazayas, an ounce, but because they're less than an ounce each, the diavad, then when you nullify the chametz, that goes also for that small piece of chametz that you didn't find. So the custom is you put out 10 pieces of bread. Now, you don't wrap it in aluminum foil. Do not wrap it in aluminum foil, because when you burn it, the aluminum foil doesn't burn that easily. You put it either in a napkin, wrap it up, or in a plastic, but you make sure it doesn't crumble. There's no crumbs coming from it. You put out 10 pieces of bread, and it doesn't matter if you know where they are. You can know where they are. You put out the 10 pieces of bread. You take a candle, preferably now they sell the Bedikat chametz kits. You put out the 10 pieces of bread in various different places. The halacha says you gather the family around. You make the bracha asher kitchanu b'mitzvayse v'tzivanu al biur chametz, which simply means burning chametz, even though you're not burning the chametz now, but the purpose of searching is to find chametz and to burn it. So it's part of the burning process. So you make the bracha al biur chametz, and then you start looking for the chametz. In every room that you brought chametz into during the year, you need to do Bedikat chametz, which includes your cars and any other places that you have chametz in. We mentioned before, if you want to do it everything else a few days earlier, you could do that, as long as you leave one room, the Alter Rebbe says, for Bedikas chametz night, because then you can make the bracha. We learned that you can only make the bracha on Bedikas chametz night. So if you want to do your Bedikas chametz tonight, tomorrow night, next night, whatever, it doesn't matter. As long as you leave one room that you're going to be doing the night of Bedikas chametz, and then you're going to be able to make the bracha. After you finish Bedikas chametz, you gather all 10 pieces of bread, put it into a paper bag, and then you wrap it up. And not only that, you take the spoon, the handle of the spoon, so you put it in the bag like this, the leftover candle, the feather, the spoon you put with the handle protruding from the bag. Okay, so you tie it, everything, the 10 pieces of bread or anything else that you find, you tie it with something that burns, by the way, and then the handle of the stick protrudes up outside of the bag. Then you make sure that you put it away, that no mice get to it, no little kids get to it, no big kids get to it. It's put away in a safe place. After Bedikas chametz at night, then you nullify the chametz. You do bittul chametz, okay, as it says in the Seder, in the Haggadah, wherever it may be. Okay, and you make sure that the chametz you're going to be eating the next day is put away, and so on and so forth. The next day, like we said, we have Tainis B'chaim. If you're firstborn, you have to fast until you hear a siyum, which means no coffee or eating anything until you hear a siyum. This year, because Yom Tif is Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos, so there's something called Eruv tavshilin. Eruv tavshilin means Eruv Yom Tif. That means this year, Wednesday, you take a kazayas of matzah, a kibetza of matzah, which is basically an entire shmura matzah, and a kazayas, 1 ounce of meat, fish, chicken, something like that. And you pick them up, and in the Seder there's something called Eruv tavshilin, which allows, by doing this, I don't want to get into the whole thing because we don't have time, but the bottom line of the Eruv tavshilin allows the Jew to cook on Friday for Shabbos. You cannot cook Thursday, the first day Yom Tov for Shabbos. The only thing the Eruv tavshilin allows you to do is that you can cook on Friday for Shabbos. Normally, you're not allowed to cook one day Yom Tov to the next. You're not allowed to even cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos. So therefore, the Eruv tavshilin allows the Jew or Jewess to cook on Friday for Shabbos, providing the Eruv tavshilin still in existence. If the food, not the matzah, if the food is non-existent by mistake, somebody ate it up on Friday or before Friday, you don't have an Eruv tavshilin. The Eruv tavshilin matzah also, and the food, the chicken, the egg, the meat, whatever, the fish, has to be existing until all your preparations for Shabbos are done. The custom is you eat the Eruv tavshilin on Shabbos, the food that you put away. So the dinner is like this. The Eruv tavshilin must be made any time on Wednesday. It has to be made only Eruv Yom Tif. You have to make it. It could be done in the morning. It could be done in the afternoon. A shliach in your house is able to do it for you. You make the Eruv tavshilin. You put away the matzah and the food. It's not to be eaten until Shabbos.
It must be done Wednesday, you said, or the Thursday?
The Eruv tavshilin is to be done Wednesday, Eruv Yom Tif. If, God forbid, somebody forgot in this Yom Tif, Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos, and not Rosh Hashanah, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, if you by mistake did not do it on Wednesday like you're supposed to, so then on Thursday you can make an Eruv tavshilin with the condition that if today is Yom Tif, tomorrow is I don't need it, and if tomorrow Friday is the real Yom Tif, then today's Eruv Yom Tif. But let's just leave it as not forgetting to do it on Wednesday. You can do it anytime on Wednesday morning. Just do it in a way that you don't forget to do it. Now, even when you're cooking for Shabbos, on Friday, the food has to be edible on Friday. Not that you're actually eating it on Friday. The din of Eruv tavshilin allows you to cook on Friday for Shabbos, but in a way that if the guests would come to your house on Friday, you'll have what to feed them. But again, you cannot put up a cholent right before Shabbos. It has to be whatever you're cooking for Shabbos must be edible on Friday sometime. It could be ready an hour before Shabbos, it's edible. But if you want to put up a cholent, a Pesach cholent, Shabbos morning, Friday morning for Shabbos, the cholent has to be put up early enough that the cholent is technically edible when before Shabbos begins. Okay, that's the concept of Eruv tavshilin. Now, Erev Pesach, even though our custom is that we don't eat Pesach the Matzah from Purim, but halachically it's forbidden to eat shmura matzah on Erev Pesach. The Gemara, in fact, has very sharp expressions about somebody who eats matzah on Erev Pesach. So Erev Pesach, you're not allowed to eat matzah. In LA, I'm giving you LA times. You're allowed to eat chametz this year because we changed the clock. In LA, you're allowed to eat chametz until 10:49 a.m. The chametz must be sold, burnt, and nullified before 11:54. So you have until 10:49 to eat chametz. Chametz has to be burnt by 11:54. Now, our custom is, and this is a very big misconception, I don't know where people get it from. Our custom, the Rebbe writes in the Haggadah, is that we don't eat any of the ingredients of the maror and the chametz from Erev Pesach in the morning until the end of the sandwich, the Korech, at the second Seder. Now, what does it mean, the ingredients of the maror and chametz? So we don't eat horseradish, we don't eat lettuce, we don't eat nuts, we don't eat apples. Wine we drink, obviously, for Kiddush and the things we need to do. But those are the basic things, or pears, if people put pears into the chametz. You don't eat those ingredients of matzah, of maror and chametz. Some people have this notion, I don't know where they get it from, that they don't eat anything on the Seder plate. That's not true. You can have potatoes, even if you use it for karpas, you can have meat. The only things you don't eat are the ingredients that you put into the maror and the chametz. From Erev Pesach in the morning until the end of the sandwich, the second night, which means if you want to serve for dessert at the first Seder, applesauce, for instance, our custom is not to do it because it's before the second day's Korech. If you want to serve it the second day for dessert, the second Seder for dessert, then it's after Korech, then you can serve applesauce for dessert. Another thing which women need to keep in mind when you're cooking for Pesach, and this was mentioned before. Somebody asked it before. You're not allowed to eat the first 2 nights roasted, broiled meat or chicken, which means as follows. Now, the Rebbe calls in Shulchan Aruch Tzli Keder. Tzli Keder means a pot roast. In the olden times, they used to take a roast, put it into a pot with no liquid, and they would cook it like that. That would be called a pot roast. But now the Rebbe writes, as long as you put in a little, if you put in a little bit of liquid, it's not a problem. So you can have barbecued meat, you can have roasted meat, you cannot have baked meat or cooked unless if there is liquid in the process of making the meat or chicken. That applies only for the first 2 nights of Pesach. During the day, no problem. The first 2 nights of Shabbos, you can have it. The first 2 nights of Pesach, you don't have roasted or broiled chicken that doesn't have any liquid in it. Okay, that's as far as Erev Pesach goes. Let's go. Now, another important din, by the way. Nail cutting and haircuts should be done before midday on Pesach. Erev Pesach, I mean, which is before 12:56. In other words, if you want to cut your nails or take a haircut, it should be done before 12:56. If you didn't, nails you're allowed to cut after the time, but a haircut can only be taken from a non-Jew. So the practical thing, you have to cut your nails and cut your hair Erev Pesach, again, which this year is Wednesday, before 12:56 p.m., okay, before 1 o'clock, because then you can't even take a haircut from another Jew. Okay, Erev tavshilin we discussed. Now, coming to the Seder itself. The Seder itself cannot begin before nightfall. Nightfall in LA is 7:58, approximately 8 o'clock. You cannot halachically begin the Seder until 8 o'clock. I know it's late and you have guests, whatever it is, but you're not allowed to begin the Seder before nightfall. The reason for that is because when it comes to the mitzvah of Matzah, the Torah says you have to eat it at night. When the Chachamim instituted the 4 cups of wine, they instituted it similar to the mitzvah of Matzah. And therefore, Kiddush, which is one of the 4 cups, you're only allowed to make Kiddush at the Seder. You could have a Mayav earlier. Mayav you could bring in earlier, that's not a problem. But you can't bring in the Seder early before 8 o'clock in LA time. Certain cities, it's much later. Europe, it's much later. In other places, it could be earlier, whatever. Maggid, both nights of Pesach, we add the whole halal at the end of Maggid. Okay, now let's come to the actual Seder itself. And to preface it by saying that all the mitzvahs of the Seder night are equal for men and women. And any kid over bar and bas mitzvah, they're obligated equally in all the obligations of the night. Except we'll mention a few things, they're not obligations, but additional things that women don't necessarily have to do. But basically it means like this: the 4 cups of wine, eating of the matzah, eating of the maror, reciting major parts of the Haggadah. Okay, Afikoman, Korech, all these mitzvahs apply equally to men and to women. Okay, so therefore, women, as careful as they might be, being in the kitchen, doing everything, but they have to make sure they say the Haggadah. Now, you could say the Haggadah in any language you want. You can read it in English, it's fine. You can read it in Chinese, any language you want. You could read the Haggadah, but you need to say the Haggadah. So let's go through the steps of the Seder. What our customs are, what halacha is, what our customs are. And the thing is like this. Before we even get to the actual Seder, there's a mitzvah of beginning the Seder ASAP. Once the time comes that you're allowed to make the Seder, it's appropriate to start the Seder because we don't want the kids to fall asleep. The kids are a vital part of the Seder. So therefore, it says the table should be set before nightfall, before night. Everything should be ready to go, except the Seder plate. The Rebbe writes, the Seder plate we set up after Maariv, right before the Haggadah, right before the Seder, right before we make it. The way Chabad custom is, okay, to set up the Seder plate is as follows. Most people have 3 matzahs separately, and then the ka'ara, which by reading the Seder plate, is separate. Chabad custom is we have the 3 matzahs, okay, on a silver tray, or silver, as much possible, it should be silver, whatever, go silver plated. So we have the 3 matzahs with a separation of a cloth or a napkin in between the 3 matzahs. You have a cloth, matzah, cloth, matzah, cloth, matzah. On top of that, you put something. People can put aluminum foil just to make sure the liquid doesn't seep onto the matzah, because we are fanatic about not getting the matzah wet. And then we have the 6 things on the Seder plate. The Seder plate that 95% of the world uses today is really the Kabbalistic Seder plate of the Arizal. The Arizal instituted the Seder plate the way we have it. Now you have what's called, on top right is the Zereya, which in English is translated as the shank bone. There's a lot of different customs, what people use, and everything is fine. I'm saying what Chabad custom is. We use the neck of a chicken, which is roasted, with most of the meat taken off it. So you take a chicken neck, you roast it, you take off most of the meat, and that is on the Seder plate top right. Top left is the egg. Our custom is to use a hard-boiled egg, and we still keep it in the shell, in the peel. In middle is the maror, okay, which according to our custom, basically we use romaine lettuce and horseradish, both of them combined to the amount. Then at the bottom right is the chametz, which is again made from apples, pears, nuts, mixed with a little bit of wine. The left, bottom left is the karpas. Now the karpas, there's many different customs of what we use. The Rebbe writes we use either potatoes or onions. The Rebbe himself used onions. Okay, so you have either the whole onion, a piece of an onion, you put that as karpas. And then again, at the bottom middle, you have another maror, which is called the chazeres. So then you have again the romaine lettuce and the horseradish. Now you have to be careful when people check for bugs. This is a very important din. When people check for bugs, they tell you to soak the romaine lettuce in salt sometimes and leave it there, and then you take it and wash it off with the veggie, whatever you do with it. But there's a din like this. Cooked maror is not kosher for the Seder. Halachically, if you leave something in cold water for 24 hours, it's considered cooked. If you put it into salt water, halachically, if there's not the drop of salt, there's a substantial amount of salt, it's considered cooked after 18 minutes. So if you're using salt in the water to wash, to soak the maror, you have to make sure it's in the water for less than 18 minutes. Or if you're just using plain cold water, you have to make sure it's in the water less than 24 hours. Otherwise, it's called cooked maror, and cooked maror is no good. Okay, Kadesh. The first one of the 4 cups is Kiddush. Now, normally during the year, the husband makes Kiddush, or the head of the household makes Kiddush. The wife, the women listen, the Yosef from the Kiddush, he pours him a little bit of wine, and that's the way it goes. That doesn't work by the Seder. Because by the Seder, everybody has to drink their own 4 cups. So it could be done in a number of ways. Everybody fills their cup before we'll call him the husband, the head of the household, before he makes Kiddush. Everybody has their wine, grape juice. They listen to his Kiddush. And then when he finishes making Kiddush, they're Yosef from his Kiddush, and then they sit down and they drink the wine. They do not have to make a ber piagafen. because they fulfilled their Beri Priagofen obligation from the husband's Beri Priagofen. Now, ideally, wine should be used for the Seder. According to many opinions, it should have at least 5% alcohol. If somebody can't, they can use grape juice, but you should make sure it's not from concentrate. And if you can't use grape juice, then if you can't use all wine, you can mix it with grape juice. If you can't mix it with grape juice, use only grape juice. You have to call it up because there's certain substitutes, but the Rav needs to hear exactly what your story is and to guide you if you can't drink wine or grape juice. It's preferable to use red wine for the Seder. Generally, red wine is halachically better. If somebody wants to use white wine, what they could do is first pour in a little bit of red wine in the cup, pour in a little bit of red wine, and then add the white wine so the wine will look red anyway. But it's still preferable, if possible, to use red wine for the Sedar. So that's Kadesh. Okay, after everybody drinks the wine, the men have to recline. The women don't recline. You just drink the wine. It's very important to mention, you can't sip the wine. You have to drink the wine. The wine has to be drunk, preferably in one gulp or two gulps. But you can't sip the wine. If you're going to sip the wine, it's going to take you an extended period of time to drink more than half the cup. You might not be yetzer the mitzvah. So when you're drinking the wine, you're not allowed to talk in the middle of the drinking. You drink the wine and you drink it up as quickly as possible. You need to drink at least more than half the cup.
You're pretty useless.
The cup has to hold at least 3 ounces. So you need a 3-ounce cup or becher. You have to drink minimum more than half. Preferable is to drink the entire cup. Okay, that's Kadesh. Then we come to Urchatz. Urchatz means you wash your hands for the karpas, but you wash your hands without a bracha. Okay, you wash your hands or like you would for bread, but you don't make a bracha. Because we're dipping something into liquid that according to many opinions, you have to wash on it. Even if you don't the whole year, you do it, that the kids should ask, what is this? You're washing and you're not eating challah and matzah. So you wash your hands without a bracha. I know people don't keep this, and I still don't figure out why. But l'chayre, you're not allowed to talk after that washing either until you make hadam on the karpas. Because the only reason you don't make a bracha is because it's a shal, do you make a bracha or not? But you shouldn't be talking because the washing is going on the eating of the karpas. So you wash your hands like you would for bread, like for challah, but or matzah, you don't make a bracha. You come to the table, you take a small piece of onion or potato. It should be less than an ounce. You dip it into the salt water. Okay. And our minig is to dip it 3 times into the salt water. And then you make Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam Beri Pri Ha'adama. When you make the Ha'adama on the karpas, you have in mind that is also going for the maror and the maror of the sandwich. This is the whole question if you have to make another brach on the maror. So therefore, this is the best thing what your halacha says to do. When you make Adam and the karpas, you have in mind, it goes not only on the karpas, it goes on the maror and the maror of the sandwich. Our custom is not to recline when we eat the karpas. Okay, so that's Kadesh. Everybody has to listen to Kiddush, drink the wine. Urchatz, everybody goes and washes their hands. You don't talk, but you don't make a bracha. And then you eat the karpas, not reclining. So you dip the onion or potato into salt water 3 times. You make the bracha Beri Pri Ha'adama and you eat it. Next is Yachatz. Yachatz is you break the middle matzah. That applies obviously to the guy or the men that have a Seder plate. Or for women, for whatever reason, is having a Seder plate. So you break the middle matzah. You take the larger piece I know in yeshiva they say you take the larger half, which is a contradiction of terms. You take the larger piece, and our custom is to break it into 5 pieces, and you put it away for the Afikoman. But when you break the middle matzah, you can't break it like 3/4 and 1/4, because the quarter you need a kazayas left from the middle matzah also. So you break it approximately half. You just take the bigger piece, you break it into 5 pieces, and you put it away for the Afikoman. The Rebbe writes by the Rebbe Rashab, once it broke into 6, by mistake it broke into 6 pieces, he put away 1 piece, and he put away 5 pieces for the Afikoman. So there's an Indian dafka of, there's a Kabbalistic reason for that. That's urchas, yachas. You break the middle matzah. Many people have a custom, they hide it in the pillow. Many people have a minute, the kids take the Afikoman, and it's all halachically to keep the kids up. The Rebbe writes, our minhag is not for the kids to steal the Afikoman, so you just play around with it, and you'd make the father hide it, and the kids find it. Same thing, but we don't want to teach your kids to steal and get rewarded for it. We don't want to teach that in chinuch to our children. Next comes Maggid. Maggid, we said before, is reciting the Haggadah. That everybody, men and women, have to say major parts of the Haggadah. Avodah Mayinu, Metchila Evdei Avodah Zara, Ram Gamliel, Pesach, Matzah, and maror. There's certain things that Dayenu, believe it or not, like we mention every year, is not one of the vital, most important parts of the Haggadah. But certain parts, especially Ram Gamliel with Pesach, Matzah, maror, Avodah Mayinu, certain parts you really, every person needs, every man, woman, child on their level, need to say it. And again, you could say it in English, and as long as you say it. Reading it is not enough. There's a mitzvah to say it. You can't read the Haggadah. You have to read it with your eyes, I'm saying. You actually have to read, verbally articulate the words of the Haggadah in any language, but you have to say the words. Now, when we pour off the wine, many people take the 10 plagues with their fingers, dam, tzadeh, kinam. There's a reason for that. But our custom is we pour off the wine, 16 times, dam, ve'eshu, simmer, soshin, and then the tzachadash ba'achav, we pour it off 16 times. And then we spill out that wine, we refill the second cup. Okay, we refill the second cup. At the end of the reciting of the Haggadah, we say again the bracha, again, we finish the bracha, we say Beri Pri Hagafen, men and women all say the bracha again, Beri Pri Hagafen, and we drink it reclining. Okay, now after Maggid comes Rachza. Again, now we wash our hands again, like we would for bread, but with the bracha. Now you have the mitzvah Meitzi Matzah, which is the only biblical mitzvah that night that we have today. All the other mitzvahs are rabbinic. The matzah that we eat, Meitzi Matzah, is biblical mitzvah of eating a kazayas of matzah. Now, because we broke the middle matzah, we're left with 2.5 matzahs. Okay? So the hoster, again, whoever has a Seder plate, picks up the 2.5 matzahs, because you need 2 matzahs for chalas and Shabbos and Yom Tiv. You pick up the 2.5 matzahs, you say hametzi. You drop the bottom matzah. Now you're left with 1.5 matzahs. So now you make the second bracha, asher ketshanu b'mitzvaytu b'tzivanu al achilas matzah. And then you have to eat a kazayas of matzah. Now, preferably for the first one, it should be 1 ounce weight of matzah. I know a lot of people say it's not, but that's not mashma from the Rebbe's Luch Kel Chabad. It should, especially the first, which is biblical mitzvah, should be 1 ounce of matzah. Now, depending on the size of your matzah, how thick it is, then you need a smaller piece. If it's thinner, you need a bigger piece. But here is a very interesting thing. You have left 1.5 matzahs. You need to eat a kazayas. There's 2 opinions in halacha. Do you eat it from the top matzah, or do you eat it from the middle matzah? Which one do you eat the kazayas? You need to eat one kazayas, but which one do you eat it from? So therefore, halacha says it's preferable to eat a kazayas from each. If you can't, you eat a kazayas from the top matzah. But that only applies to women or other people that don't have a Seder, that have the Seder plate. Men that have a Seder plate and have this 1.5 matzahs, and we don't know which one you eat, so you need a kazayas of each. People that do not have their own Seder plate and they get matzah from the box, they only need to eat 1 kazayas of matzah. They don't need to eat 2 kazayas of matzah. There's absolutely no reason for it. So, but you need to eat the kazayas of matzah, or men eat the 2 kazayas of matzah. The matzah, again, has to be eaten quickly. You can't nibble on the matzah. You must eat at least 1 kazayas of matzah between 4 and 9 minutes, preferably 4 minutes, but not more than 9. And by the way, it takes longer than you think it does. But when do you count? When does the time clock start working? Not when you put the matzah in your mouth. When you make your first swallow, that's when the time clock begins at 4 to 9 minutes. So therefore, what people try to do, it's not necessarily Emily post etiquette, but what people try to do is they'll put matzah in the mouth, they'll chew it, they won't swallow it yet, because that takes time to chew it. And then they'll start the clock, so to speak, when they take the first swallow, and then they make sure to eat the kazayas of matzah within 4 to 9 minutes. Okay, that's meitzi matzah. Then you have the mitzvah of maror. Maror, you have to eat the bitter herbs, which nowadays is rabbinic, but there's still a bracha. Now, because maror is rabbinic, you don't need to eat a kazayas, you need to eat a kazayas, but you don't need to eat an ounce of maror. 3/4 of an ounce is enough, because it's only rabbinic. And the horseradish and the lettuce, both together combined to this 3/4 of an ounce. Now, our custom is like this. We have the chametz, which is not with wine yet. We mix a little bit of wine into a chametz, okay, just to make it a little bit wettish. Then we dip the maror in the chametz 3 times. Then we say the bracha Baruch Atah Hashem Asher Kitchan B'Mitzvayis B'Tzvon Halachilas Matzah, and we do not recline, but we eat it. Matzah, the men must recline when they eat the matzah. Women, the custom is they don't recline at all. Korech says they don't recline. Okay, without getting into all the halachic reasons why. Okay, then after maror, you have what's called Korech. Korech is the sandwich, which according to Hillel was the proper way of eating the matzah and the maror together with the korban Pesach. In other words, in biblical times, in the times of Bais Din, how did they eat matzah to Seder? They didn't do all the stuff we do today. They ate a kazayas of matzah together with the kazayas of meat and together with the maror. Okay? Hillel, though, held you do it all together. So according to Hillel was the first, what's called in English, the first combo sandwich. Hillel initiated the Korech, which means a sandwich. Hillel said you have to eat the korban Pesach and the maror and the matzah. So you had the matzah, they put the maror and the korban Pesach, they sliced the meat like a sandwich, and then they ate it. Because Hillel was a great authority, so we do Korech like Hillel does, even though we ate already the matzah and the maror separately, but according to Hillel, we do it together. And again, the din is you have to recline when you eat the Korech. But coming back to the maror. Because we are so fanatically crazy about not getting the matzah wet, so we take a little bit of dry chametz, we put it on top, a little bit on top of the matzah. I'm sorry, we put it on top of the maror, and then you shake it off. So the Korech basically has very little dry chametz on it. And then you put the matzah with the maror in the middle. Again, you need another kazayas of matzah, which here you could be making 3/4 of an ounce, because it's not the biblical obligation anymore. And then you have a kazayas of maror, and you eat the matzah and maror together, reclining. That applies to men and women and kids on their age of chinuch also have to do it. They don't have to eat that amount, but they have to eat, the matzah, maror, Korech, and so on. After Korech, we have what's called Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch means we eat the meal. Chabad custom is we begin the meal by eating the hard-boiled egg of the Seder plate dipped into salt water. So you peel the egg, preferably straight over the garbage, or onto a separate napkin, and you throw out the napkin right away. We peel the egg, no bracha, no saying anything. By the way, by Korech, you say Keno Sehila. There's a paragraph that you say in the Haggadah. But here, you start the meal with the egg dipped in salt water. That's the custom. You don't have to eat the whole egg if you don't want. You don't like eggs, you don't have to do it. This is the custom to eat the egg dipped into salt water. So again, we dip the egg in salt water 3 times, and then we eat the egg. Then, whatever you have for dinner, you can't eat again. You can't eat pot roast. You can't, unless there's liquid in it. You're not allowed to have any barbecued meat, any meat that doesn't have a little bit of liquid in it. You're allowed to drink more wine during the meal. You're allowed to drink wine during the meal. And when you finish the meal, again, for dessert, you can't have applesauce or things that the ingredients of the matzah, the maror, and the chametz. And then before benching, that's when we eat Afikoman. So again, you have the Afikoman that you put away, but the Chabad, the custom is, and again, the men usually are more strict with this, we eat 2 kezesim. Again, one for the matzah and one for the korban Pesach, and one for the matzah eaten with the korban Pesach. So the Rebbe writes, if you could do it, you do it. You have 2 kezesim for Afikoman. If somebody has a problem with it, they can eat 1 ounce for the Afikoman. And again, it could be 3/4 of an ounce of matzah, and then they have the Afikoman. Our custom is the first night, we try to eat Afikoman before 12:56, which is halachic midnight. If possible, the second night we're not makbid, but the first night we're trying to be makbid to eat Afikoman before 12:56. By the way, I do want to say another important din before we continue, and that is people that have, let's say, communal seders, and then they go home to make their own seder very late. You have to realize that there's a biblical mitzvah to eat matzah that night before 12:56. Forget that Afikoman. You can't eat the kazayis of matzah after 12:56, even if you start your seder very late. The mitzvah of matzah is to eat it before midnight. So again, people that make communal Sedar and then they go home and they start their own Seder and they start very late, you have to make sure to realize that you need to eat the matzah before 12:56. Then we bench, we drink the 3rd cup of wine, then we open the door to show that it's a night that Hashem protects us. We go with the candle to the door, you follow it in the Haggadah, and then the people come back to the table, and then we fill the 4th cup of wine right after we drink the 3rd cup. We fill the 4th cup of wine. They go to the door to open the door with the candles, and then we say the last part of the Haggadah, which is Halo Nirtzam. And then at the end of that, we finish with the 4th cup of wine. Okay, then we make an after brach. Our custom is not to eat or drink anything after the Afikoman until we go to sleep. Halachically, many opinions say you could drink water, but the Rebbe writes, our custom is we don't eat or drink anything after the Afikoman, except the 2 cups of wine, because we want to go to sleep with the taste of the Afikoman in our mouth. I want to get a little bit into the dinim of the first day and the second day going into Shabbos. Now, the first day Yom Tov, this year is Thursday, you're not allowed to do any preparations for the second Seder. You can't cook, you can't set the table, you can't do anything in preparation for the second Seder. If you have a communal Seder, you can ask a Shiloh, there's certain leniencies there. But in the private home, you cannot do any cooking or any preparation or any setting tables until after Lichbenchen, which now is 7:58 in LA. So you can't do any preparation until 7:58. Then again, you bench Lich with the Shechionu again, and then you get ready for the Seder. Second night of Pesach, we begin counting the Omer, don't forget. Now, Friday, because it's out of Shabbos, and the second day Yom Tov. By the way, the first day Yom Tov, we bench Tal and Shul. I mean, I'm not talking about the order of Tefillah. You'll be in Shul, you'll see. But on the Friday, again, even when you made an Eruv tavshilin, you have to make sure that the food is edible on Friday. I just want to say another interesting thing. When you want to go to sleep on Thursday afternoon, let's say for the second Seder, you're allowed to sleep on the first day Yom Tov, because it's enjoyable to sleep. But you're not allowed to say, this is the din of Shabbos. You're not allowed to say, I'm going to sleep in order to be up at the Seder. That you can't say. You're even not allowed to tell the kids, go to sleep because you have to be up for the second Seder. You're not supposed to say it because then you're preparing from one day to the next. Or from Shabbos for after Shabbos. You're allowed to sleep because sleeping itself is enjoyable. But you're not allowed to say that I'm going to sleep. And again, you can't do any preparations whatsoever for the second Seder. We also count the Sfiras Omer. Shabbos, again, you have to bench licht early. You have to remember because you're going into Shabbos, and it's a regular Shabbos Ladik Neshel Shabbos Kadesh. Ma'ariv is a regular Friday night Ma'ariv. It's Mizmah LeDavid, and we say Yalav V'Yov in the Shemon Esrei. We had Yalav V'Yov in the benching, but basically, Shabbos is Shabbos. So just you have to keep in mind it's Chol HaMoed. Now, for the last days of Pesach, we don't say Shechionu, not by candle lighting, not by Kiddush. Smoked meat, you cannot use by this. Somebody asked the question. Smoked meat, you can't use because there's no liquid in it. It must have liquid.
What if you put oil on the meat or oil or pepper?
As long as there's liquid on it, it's fine.
So oil is considered liquid, it's fine?
Oil is liquid, yeah.
Thank you.
Who should have their own kaida? It's very interesting. By the Sephardic community, they have it's an opinion, mitzad halacha, reva madas melech. By the Sephardim, only one person has a Seder plate. That's it. Only the head of the house will have a Seder plate. People don't have their own. In our custom, we have, the men usually have their own Seder plates. Again, second question was asked, when we pour the wine by the Seder for the Kiddush in the 4 cups. So in halacha is brought down to show freedom. Somebody else pours the wine, but our minhag, the Rebbe writes, is we don't do that. Everybody pours their own wine. Somebody asked about traveling. They're gonna have to call me privately. If they're going to the East Coast during Chol HaMoed and for the last days, they can sell their chametz here. It's not a problem. It's only if you're going to be there for the first days of Pesach, then you have to sell it in New York or wherever you're going. Okay, I just want to mention that, by the way, the Chabad newsletter, the Halacha newsletter is out. if you want, you can go onto the show website, jewishbeverlyhills.com. I think it's up there already. And if there are any other questions, we'll take them. And
How much, Rabbi, how much is Kasai? Is it like a 3/4 of a shvur matzah? Depending, of course, on the thickness.
it depends on the thickness. If you have matzah that have 8 matzahs per pound, then it's a half a matzah, exactly. If you have 7 matzahs per pound, then it's less than a half. If you have 9 matzahs per pound, it's more than a half. You know what I mean? So it really depends. I'll tell you what people do, and it's the best thing to do, is they have a little scale, and before Yom Tov, it saves a lot of time by the Seder also. Before Yom Tov, you take matzah and you sit down and you weigh it. Let's say you have 10 people, so you need X amount of bags of matzah, right? Various times. You may take a little scale, you know, and you measure an ounce for the main mitzvah, then you can measure 3/4 of an ounce for the other ones. And you put it into a bag, and you know this is the shit that people should eat. This saves a lot of time. Now the guys that have the Seder plate, they can't do that. They need to have whole matzahs. So they figure it out themselves. How much is you know, depending on the thickness of the matzah. But the best thing, practically speaking, what people do is they weigh the matzah before Pesach. They put it into bags and they have it ready, and they just give them out at the Seder. It saves a lot of time, and then you know they're doing it right.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Spelt matzah is
People that are allergic to wheat can have oats or spelt. It's not preferred, but if they can't have any matzah from the 5 grains, which is wheat, barley, rye, oats, and spelt, those are the 5 grains that matzah can be made out of. If any of, now preferably is wheat, obviously, because wheat comes first. But if somebody is allergic to wheat, they can get matzah from spelt. If people, I don't want to get into the whole thing now. If people are not able to eat matzah, they need to call their Eruv, and the Eruv will guide them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, you know, with the various leniencies that people might need. But I'm just saying these are the rules that we gave. The halachos by themselves. And then if there's any, you know, if there's any exceptions to the rule, you have to call, and the Rav will guide you how to, you know, how to do the mitzvahs right.
But when we eat Afikoman, do we say anything before that? Do we say this is?
No, we don't say. Only time we say is by Korech, by the sandwich. We don't make the bracha. We say Kein Asehil, there's not based on Shayikayim, you know, so on.
Thank you.
But that is an obligation for men and women to say, at least so we said the main parts of the Haggadah. Okay, so anyway, as we mentioned, Monday night, Mitzvah Shem will be a class, but then that's it until after Pesach. Next Wednesday, there is no class. And everybody have a great Shabbos.
Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Non-Pesach question. Can you trim your nails tonight? Is it considered Thursday already?
Tonight's Thursday already.
So you can't trim nails tonight?
The custom is not to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everybody have a great Shabbos, all good things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Thank you so